All right, we're back, and it's COMP213 Web Interface Design, and it's week 11, lesson 11, part 4. We just finished talking about your final project, and now we're going to talk about a new topic, web fonts, and what the hell are they, right? So there's a couple places we can get web fonts, and now up until now, you've been using fonts in your code. So here we are in our CSS, and if you notice in our main CSS, in the body of the top part of my body, right, we say my font family is Arial, Helvetica, Sans Serif, right? And if you notice, I have a few options. I can certainly go down and type in whatever some fonts that I have available to me, and there's a broad list of fonts. But what happens if I choose a font, for you guys to understand this, right? What happens if I choose a font that you don't have, like on your computer? Right? What happens? Let's say, for example, I choose Rage. I don't know what that is, but let's just use Rage as my font, right? So I'm going to use my font family is Rage. Okay, cool. I'm just making it up, right? And let's run this thing now. This is your from your lesson 11 site here. Here's Rage, right? It's very illegible, right? I can almost hardly see it, what Rage is, right? But that's the font, right? What if you don't have this font Rage that makes your site look like this, right? It won't render. It'll default to something else. You might come up with something like Times New Roman or something. It won't look the way you like it, right? So usually what we do is we say, well, if you can't find Rage, right, what do? We put in a comma and we do something else like this. Maybe we want a sans serif, right? Sans serif. So if you can't do Rage, give me sans serif, right? At least that way we're good, right? Rage is a weird font. I'm just picking it randomly, right? But that's one thing you can do with your fonts to make sure that your font family looks right. But what if you want it so you want your stuff to look awesome, right? And you know what? You're really not happy with Helvetica. If I put Helvetica in there, Arial Helvetica Sans Serif, I just choose this family, right? And let us refresh the page and see what it looks like now, right? So this is your typical Helvetica Sans Serif font. It's a very, a basic looking form. And I want to spice this up. I want to make my form look a little nicer, right? Well, there are a couple services out there that can help us out. One of them, which is very popular, if I go to fonts, is, I'm just going to go hit the top one. I'm going to go one at a time, is Google Fonts, right? Google produces fonts for you. And here's some examples of some Google fonts that you can grab, right? So you look down and there's some interesting font designs here as an example. So I'm just gonna go down and pick some fonts that look a little bit interesting. Like for example, this one. I want to use Titanium Web. This is the one I want to use, right? It looks like the G's are a little bit more technical because I have a different way of I do my fonts. I want to use this one. So what do I do when I go to Google Fonts? And again, you go to google.com/fonts. I want to click Add to Collection. That's what I do. When I do that, it shows me that I have one font in my collection, right? Now, from here, what I want to do is I click Choose. Now, Use. If I click Use, it gives me some examples of a couple things, actually. I can choose different weights for my font. Like, for example, I have right now a normal 400. Maybe also I want to have other options for my fonts. For example, a bold 700. I also want that, a bold type font as well. And if you notice, it also tells me the page load effect, like what effect this has on my page loading. Because when you load up something that's, and this is a glyph that kind of loads on. It's a little picture. That's what each font is. Well, it increases your page load. It takes longer for your page to load up, right? Okay. Then you can choose your character sets. Latin is fine. Read this. And then this is the code to add to your website. It tells you the code to add. It's not like it's rocket science here. So this is the code right here. Fonts, Google, APIs, font family, blah, blah, blah. Here it is right here. Right? So that's the code you add to your website. So there's three ways of doing it. There's the standard way. There's the @import way, which we haven't talked about, right? And there's the JavaScript way. If you're a JavaScript person, you want to add it in through the JavaScript. Obviously, we're not going to do these two ways. We're going to go through the standard way. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this whole line, right? Here it is. I'm just going to select this whole line here, and I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to go into my website, right? I'm just going to kind of kill this for a second. And then on my index.html, let's just go here so I can show you how this works, right? Do it with me if you want to do it together. If I look at my index.html, here it is, right? If you notice, I've got my reset and my main, you know, for a couple of links here. Hey, I got a question for you. Should I put my font before my reset? Is that a good thing? No, it would reset it. We don't want that, right? So I don't want that. It's got to be here. So I'm going to go Control V and link it here. It's a link. It's an external link to a CSS page that's not within our website right now. So we've done internal links, right? So this is reset. This is a link that's inside of our site structure. And now for the first time, we're doing an external link, right, to a CSS file that exists on Google. Hey, you're going to say this, Tom, what happens if Google's down? Then I'm not going to have access to my, you know, my font. Guys, if Google is down, we have bigger problems, right? Same thing, if Microsoft goes down or Google or some kind of Amazon, one of those big services, there's something going on the web, you know, some kind of terrorist attack that took the web down, right? I'm telling you, I don't want to say terrorist attack, but something happened for maybe power outages across the United States for Google to be down. And then maybe across the world. It's hard for Google to be down, is what I'm saying. It's got like 99.9999% availability across the world, right? So don't worry about it is what I'm saying. The only way your font's not going to be available is if you're trying to view your page offline somehow, right? So that would be one thing that would be bad. So okay, this is the first piece. And I've been asked this question before. So Tom, is it bad because it's a web font? What if the web is down? Don't think about that. That's ridiculous, right? So that's the first thing. That's the first part. Okay, good. I haven't used my font yet. I've just included it in my index.html, right? That means the CSS is there, right? But it doesn't mean that I'm actually using my font family, right? Here's a problem. If I put my font here, right, do I have access to it here in my main.css? The answer is no. So we need to make this happen, right? So if I'm going to move one or the other, I'm going to move my main CSS below it. So really this font family stuff is going to be after the reset and before my main, so I can redo it, right? Okay, good. Now, next piece. That was one part. Part 4, integrate the fonts into your CSS, right? So this is the font family. Now I have this new stuff. Titilium, Web, and then the default, the fallback, that's what it's called, just in case whatever happens, Google is down, right? And, you know, across the planet, something happened. A meteor strike, right? Something happened where we had sunspots, right, that turned off the web, right? Then sans serif is going to work for you, okay? And I'm just going to put this in. And I'm sorry to joke around like that, but truly people ask me those kind of questions. And maybe at one point there was a risk way back in the day, I don't know. For me so far, I've never seen Google go down, right? So let's go into Solution Explorer here, and I'm going to pin Solution Explorer up. I've just copied that information. I've just copied this, right? And I'm going into my main.css, just like you have. And up here, I'm just going to, just to be safe, I'm just going to paste it on top of the other one, like this. And I'm going to get rid of this one, right? Because now it's this new font, Titilium Web, right, that I'm using. Save. If all goes well, right, I've saved everything, right? I've got this font Google API here in there, and everything is typed in correctly, and I press play, right, and debug. I should have my new fonts. Now, sometimes it requires a refresh, right? But how do I tell that my font is there, right? Well, first of all, it's hard to see because my font is pretty small. Take a look. But if I go in, I'm going to just increase my dashboard to see the difference. Look at the dashboard. You can see that the fonts are different, right? Now, here's something. My forms example login form, right, as an example, my dashboard looks correct, right? And so is the links here. And even these links look maybe okay, but I get a bit of a problem. It's not propagating everywhere. You're going to say, hold on, Tom, there's some stuff missing. This doesn't look like this. Look at my L here and look at my L over here. What happened, right? What about if I type in stuff? Is my font going to be in here as well? It's not. Why? A couple reasons. Let's look through our CSS to see what's going on, right? One of them is I've got my font here, right? And remember, there's some areas that I've included things like font weight bold. If we load font weight bold for the website, let's go back. It says I have two things. I have font weight 400. That's the way we use it in our H1 tag, not font weight bold, right? You can't use font weight bold because bold doesn't exist. We have font weight 400 and 700. And that's the difference when we start using web fonts. We have to choose which one we use. We can't just go bold, because bold doesn't mean anything in this particular context, right? So that means if I want to use H1, H2, H3, H4, H5 tags, the right way, I've got to choose. I'm going to show you how this works, right? Font weight 700, right? That means there's enough pixels that are making up your glyph to make it bold, right? Bold is just a label that we use to tell that the font is fatter, right? So let's just save that and then see the effects of our page when I refresh. Do I see a difference, right? And I can tell you I do. Look at the P and the password. Look at the S's. That's a lot different than what we just saw earlier, right? Because now I've made it so that my font is bold, but it's font weight 700. So any place I put bold, I got to replace that with 700 in my website. So I'm going to go through it a little bit. So I'm going to go here, border type, display, block, auto, label, bold. That's not good. Font weight 700, right? Let's keep going through. Inline block, da-da-da-da-da. And I can search through this way, or if I'm, smart guy, I'll go Control F, right, to search, and I can go look for bold, right? And so far I haven't seen anywhere else that shows font weight bold. The other problem I see the text area has a different font family. My text area has been made Arial, Helvetica, Sans Serif. If I want this text area to have the same font as this one, I've got to use the same font family. So I'm just going to copy this one if I want to convert everything to that and put it over here. Right? The other thing that you may want to specify, if otherwise told, if you want to make your font weight a certain thing, you could specify that the default font, because remember, I've only chosen two fonts. One that's normal 400, right? And the other one that's, I love people call me on the fly here, the other one that is bold 700. So you could put a font weight of 400 as a basis. So when we do our main CSS, we could put down here font dash weight 400, right? Because that means that typically throughout our website, as a general rule, our font weight is 400 for this font. Now, here's a question for you. And this is the question that I want you to think about. Is this font the right font for the website from a paragraph block perspective? And it may not be. Maybe it's not legible. You can't read it so well, right? And this is where people use multiple font types for this. So here's an example of font weight, and I'm saying sans serif here. And I have different things. I have my margin and my border and my background and all this other stuff I've talked about. And I'm just going to skim through just for myself, just to make sure that I didn't miss anything. I don't think I did, but I'm going through to make sure that there's nothing else that says, any kind of bold or anything like that. Because if I don't have that, if I don't have any font weight bold, right, then I'm good to go. Let's take a look at what it looks like now. I'm just going to refresh my site. I've kind of saved that now and refresh. And you can also automatically see that my reset, my logins, everything else. Well, this is interesting. My buttons. Are my buttons the same as my S's on my thing here? Here's my input, reset and login. That doesn't look the same. This is okay, and now this is okay, because if I type my S, this is SSSS, it looks like it's okay, right? But this, something's wrong with my buttons. This is good. Look at my copyright, how it looks different, right? But my reset and my login don't look different. How come? Sometimes you need to be very specific if you want to change the font, the type on different pages. Definitely this didn't work, my text area here. So let's go. And then this is the thing you have to try and look at to fix, right? Don't assume just because you dropped in a new font that it's going to work, right? There's a little bit of work sometimes to be done. So font weight 700 for these things are okay. But let's go back down here from a label perspective. So here's labels, font weight 700. This is good, right? Here's my input, padding and all that kind of stuff. So all inputs, all text areas, I'm saying, have an inline block of this person. And specifically for my text area, I'm saying, hey, use this font family and make it so that the font weight is 400. I don't want that to be a little different, just specifying that. What about for buttons types? I want to do the same thing. I want to say the font weight is 400 for my button type. I'm going to take these two things, right? And I'm going to my button type, all these buttons, and specifically say that my font weight is this 400 sans serif font, and then save. So I'm going to save everything, and I'm going to go back to this web page and refresh. Now we see a difference. Here's my reset. See how the reset looks a little better now? And I have my login. It looks like it's finally taken my font. I still got a problem with my username. If I say S for my username, I can still see that it's still using an Arial. And the reason for this is because if this is defaulted, I'll be honest with you, to use the Arial as a default. Text boxes and even things like, I'm going to show you text areas, right? Let me just refresh here because this didn't take on the properties, right? Here's your message. And here's something else. Look at my contact page, right? How come my contact page looks different than my, than everything else, right? My contact page, contact us. Well, and here's the issue, guys. I gotta point this out to you nicely, so you don't get mad at me when I say this kind of stuff, right? Well, we did everything on my index.html, right? My index.html has this. Do I need to put this on every page? And the answer would be yes. You need to put this on every page because this is not a global thing. If I was to use this system of doing it, this fonts, Google API, CSS family, blah, 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 that's going to be on every page. So what's the other way, right? Because that would be a pain in the ass. If I have to go through every single page and put this line in here, and if I have 50 pages, I got to modify 50 of my pages every time I change a font. That's not good, right? So how do I fix this? I embed it the other method. I use the other method, which is the add import. When I go add import, right, this gets put into the CSS of my website, right? This add import, right? So let's see how this works. If I was to do this, right, add import, instead of putting it inside my page like index.html, this one here, I copied the add import, and I'm going to try and type it out first. Okay, so I'm going to go to the top of my CSS before everything else, before my body, right? Because it has to be way before here, and I'm going to start typing the @ sign. Now, if you look what it has here, it has @ and @ is a very special command that we can use with CSS, right? And there's some other things we can put in here. Remember, we use the @media command for media queries, right? Well, one of them is this @import. @import it happens right here. I can just simply copy and paste that one though. So @import, here's my URL, and now this is embedded inside my main.css. Why is this better? To me, it's better if you have a single page, right? Then this method is fine, right? This link style sheet stuff. But when you have multiple pages, like we will always have, right? Chances are, unless you use a single page design or something, this method won't be sufficient. Well, it will, but it's going to take much more. So let's take this out to see the difference. We'll take this method out, or take this link out. Now, so I'm back to what I was before. And now I'm going to rerun everything. So I'm going to stop debugging, and I'm going to rebuild the project, just really temporarily here, and then run it again. And when I do this, let's see if we still have our stuff going on. So I'm going to refresh the page to make sure it's all taken hold. It has, right? And if I go to Contact Us now, right, it's got the new style, right? I don't have to go to the contacts page and enter, and even my text area has stuff here. Now my enter doesn't have my same font, but my message does. Enter your message. Look at the S's here on my message, but not here and here. Why? Because inputs have to be, and if you want to really specify the type, it doesn't cascade for input types and for text areas in forms. They have a basic type of Arial, and for you to, or Courier in this particular case, and you have to override them explicitly. If you don't override them explicitly, they won't be overridden. All right, so let's take a look at that. So if you notice, customer name now has changed. I'm not sure if I like this font, by the way. I'm not telling you that I'm in love with this font. I just chose run at random to show you the differences between this and this. Now the links might look okay, but you want to set up a style of your own for the fonts. You don't want it to look so it's always the same. Okay, let's go back there and fix that. So I'm going to go back to main CSS, and I know that I'm accessing things in different places. So I've got my label and I've got my inputs. So my label, that cascaded fine. And you know what? I have my text area. I put that in there, and with a font weight of 400, right? Well, you know what? I want to do the same thing, and cascade this into my inputs. I've specifically said for my buttons, let's see if we can make it a default for all inputs and text areas. So I'm just going to put that in there just like that, right? Sometimes you need to be specific. Sometimes you can be general like this. Let's see what happens when we put it in there. Now we're doing it over and over again, and we haven't talked about at this time so far. All we've been doing is throwing CSS together inside a CSS page. We haven't cleaned it up yet. We haven't said, how do I refactor this page to make it more efficient, right? Because one rule overrides the other rule and all this kind of stuff. It's really kind of messy. We'll talk about that another day, not today. But let's take a look and see what the effect that it has. So I'm going to rerun this thing and redo everything. And now, as you can see, my username also has that font. So if I type the S, you see the S is the same as the S that's used here and the S that's used here. It is definitely now, my whole site is using that particular font, right? So lessons to learn on this one. One, when we use web fonts, there's a couple options, right? When we go to Google Web Fonts, this is the one I'm using right now. This is a free service hosted by Google with quite a few fonts on here, right? And this is a very popular way of doing styling for fonts. But be careful, because there's a couple of implementations. One of them is a standard implementation for a single page using this link reference. Or if you're using something like templates, one day we'll be using templates in different kinds of websites, you could certainly use this instead of the @import, right? That's one thing you can certainly do, right? And then also the choice of font weight. That's important because it doesn't say bold or regular anymore. You have to specify 400 or 700. Those are important numbers for font-weight. That attribute has to be specific. Let's try one more, right? Just because I want to have a difference. Let's say if I want a difference between one font and the other, and I want to have more than one font to use. What do? Right? So I'm going to just refresh the page and go back to Google Fonts and refresh this page. There we are. And if you notice, I have 0 fonts in my collection, right? And I want to use a couple of fonts now for different things. So I'm going to scroll down and choose a couple fonts. Now there's a lot of fonts in their collections here, right? Lots and lots. This is more of a serif kind of font, surreal. Let's choose ones that look really different. So you can see this is one. Here, let's Grumpy Wizards Make Toxic Brew. This looks kind of interesting, almost like a handwritten style, right? So I want to use this one. Okay, so this is called Indie Flower, so I want to add that to the collection, right? And I'm going to scroll down. I like that one for part of my text, right, as an example. And I've got this one, maybe this one here, Dosis. Grumpy Wizards Make Toxic Brew, but look at the different font style here. It's very stylistic, right, and it looks a lot different. Let's keep looking at other ones. There's tons of little examples here I want to show you so that we can see as I scroll down. Now this is the Google font library, right? So you can see that there's quite a bit of them. But I want to choose one that looks vastly different, that looks a little different. And if you want to also select them, here we go. So kill this one for a second. So I didn't want that one, I just killed it. If I want it, let's go back up to that one. So if I want to use one that I like that one that looks like writing, right? Again, I can scroll down, right? If you remember the font, you can also, like I know this is Indie Flower, I can add to my collection, right? I just kind of lower that for a second. But let's say I want to find something. I can filter it by thickness. I can filter it by slant if I want a straight or a slanted font. I can filter it by width. I can show collection only. I can filter it by script. I can even search for the font if I know what it is. I can also look what it's going to look like in a paragraph. When I instead of looking at it from a sentence, right now there's different ways of looking at it. I can look at the single word, grumpy, right? I can go into sentence, so I can see the whole sentence, how it's going to look. I can look at paragraph or poster. Poster is neat too, because it kind of shows us what it looks like in different ways. Poster is neat because it gives us the ability to go down. Like Roboto Slab is a very popular one. And if I was going to note some really popular fonts, this is Indie Flower that I'm choosing. And this is Dosis. I was going to use that. So again, there's some interesting fonts. And remember, the font sometimes makes the difference between what looks like a really nice page and what looks like a kind of amateur page, right? So Orbitron, that's really different, right? And there's Meriwether Sans. One of my favorite ones is Open Sans. Actually, it's a very popular sans. So let's say, how do I find one that's specific? Well, I can always search for it here. If I go Open Sans, if I go Open Sans, right? I want to find that one. There's Open Sans. There's two. There's Open Sans and Open Sans Condensed. So I want to use Open Sans as my basic font, but for headings, I want to use that other weird font. All right. So I'm going to choose this one, add this one to my collection. And now, if I bring up my collections, I have two of them, Indie Flower and Open Sans. They're both normal 400 as a default. I want to click Use. When I go there, it shows me that Indie Sans only has a 400 weight bold. There isn't a bold version of Indie Flower, right? Open Sans does, and I definitely want to use at least bold as an option. So normal 400 plus bold 700, those are the kind of standards I use. And again, you can use others if you want to make it extra bold for certain applications, like a front page or whatever. And then, of course, I'm not going to use this one. I want to use my @import. My new @import has a different set of values because now I'm changing my font type. This is why CSS is so powerful, right? So I'm going to copy this one. I'm going to go across to here. This is going to look different now. Let's see how it's going to look. And on the top, I'm going to go in and say, I don't want this one anymore. I want this one. So Fonts, Google API, Indie Flower plus Open Sans. I want to make it sure that my body font is Open Sans, and everything else is Open Sans. But I want my H1 tags, all my heading tags, to be Indie Flower, right? Because that makes sense. That's what I want, right? May not make sense to you. You might think Tom's crazy, right? That's an ugly font. I don't want Indie Flower used in my site, right? That's fine. I'm just talking about what it looks like. So the fallback for Indie Flower, because it looks like a cursive font, is cursive. That's the fallback. And the fallback for Open Sans is sans serif, right? So those are the two font families we can use. So I'm going to go, so again, basic font, sans serif. I'm just going to take this one here, copy it. I'm going to go back over here and say, well, let's replace this with this one, Open Sans, right? And I know that I want to go through my website and check the places where I want them. I want my text area to be Open Sans, definitely, right? Same thing with my all these other areas here. These are all going to be Open Sans, right? And again, you can go through them, or you can search and see if there's any areas here where you've specifically told your style that it's got to be Open Sans. Now, here's the thing: for H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, H6 tags, all this stuff. By the way, I specified a font weight of 700. That makes sense, right? It can't be Open Sans. Right? And oh my God, look what's happening now. I've got a problem because I want my font to be bold, but there is no bold font, right, for my font family Indie Flower. It's only 400, right? That's fine. So let's see what it looks like if I replace it. I'm just going to do this one time to show you, and then I'll probably put it back. I'll leave it at Open Sans because I like Open Sans better than Indie Flower for everything, right? So let's put Indie Flower. Oh, let's go back. Max font family Indie Flower cursive, right? And this time my font weight is going to go back to 400, just for my H1 tags and or H tags, heading tags. Okay, cool. Let's see the effect this has on my website. I'm just going to refresh here and see if this is the effect I want. Right? So here's my cursive font that I have here, and then for the rest I have Open Sans, which is a very popular font that I would highly recommend for you on. To use in your sites. It's very, very legible. But what is good for this to see this Indie Flower is it really gives us this fun looking font to use in different places if you wanted to use it in certain styles. So again, this is a contrast in font styles here that makes your page look a little bit more interesting. Is this correct? Would you use this for yourself? Maybe not, right? But it's something that you could use to spice up your fonts and make them look a little better, right? Again, you can see that the style is good for everything. So if I type in my name, my username, as an example, it gives me that very, kind of good-looking font. It's very bold. It looks like even as font weight 400 is quite strong. Again, font weight 700 is definitely a bold type font. You can see how nicely everything wraps together. And again, one of the most popular fonts on the web right now, Open Sans, and you can get that from Google, Google Fonts. Okay, let's leave it like this. I'm going to leave it so make people crazy. I'm going to leave this. All my headings are going to look like this, and look, this is looking like this too. And let's see if my contact page also takes that, and it does. Here's my contact page, and if you notice on the bottom, it's all cascaded down so that I have a different looking font for each of my pages. Now I've blown this up a little bit. I've zoomed in here so you can see everything. Right, but at the end of the day, you see that there's a nice style for all my pages. Okay, so that covers Google Fonts, and I'm going to stop recording here and take a short break, 5 or 10 minutes. And when we do, we're going to come back and look at some other font choices, and maybe we'll get into Font Awesome, which is an icon font library that's free and open source, and I'll show you how to use that.